My name is Hannah, and when I think about the path I've taken to get to this point in my life, it feels a little strange to me. I'm still young, only 32, but I already feel like a person who has accumulated too much experience and too many stories for my age, because I work as a mobile app developer in a fairly standard, unremarkable IT company, where everything is organized according to the usual rules of the corporate world. And although this job does not give me any great achievements and does not bring the excitement of changing the world, it provides me with decent pay, decent health insurance, and also the opportunity to finally pay off my college loans, which I did last year with a deep sense of relief and pride. I saved money for years, step by step getting closer to my dream, to buy my own home, a place where there will be my walls, my order, and my peace. And I admit, it was this goal that gave me the strength to live modestly, denying myself unnecessary things. But before I get into that part of my story, let me tell you about my family, because they have played an important, sometimes painful and difficult role in what has happened to me and continues to happen to me. My mother is now 58, my father is 60. They are both retired, and although life has not been particularly generous to them, they tried to stick together. I have a younger brother, Jake. He is 30, and although we were amazingly close as children, sharing secrets, laughing at the same things, and could talk for hours about trivial things, after he got married 2 years ago, it was as if a wall had grown up between us that could not be circumvented. The reason is his wife, Christina. How can I put it mildly? She is one of those women who always and everywhere puts herself in the center, makes a drama out of even a trifle, and is sure that the world must revolve around them. From the very beginning, she treated Jake like a little boy, dictating his every move, and soon she began to treat my parents the same way, who, to my surprise, literally allowed her to wipe her feet on them. I quickly realized that for my own peace of mind, it was better to stay away from Christina. The wedding itself was a real nightmare for me, and it's not even about the outfits or endless rehearsals, but the fact that my family, and I mean everyone, including my mom and dad, expected the impossible from me. They seriously decided that I should pay for the entire wedding of Jake and Christina, a huge banquet costing $40,000. Imagine, I saved money for my own house for years, lived modestly to save up, and they wanted me to give it all away for someone else's celebration. I was able to spare $10,000, and I considered it quite a generous gesture, but for Christina, it was not enough. She made a scene, and without mincing words, declared that I could not be her bridesmaid because I was not supporting their love enough. My parents, to my bitter surprise, sided with her. They did not speak to me for months, and for Christmas that year, I was not even invited to my parents' house. Imagine, I was not invited to the celebration only because I did not pay for someone else's wedding. Over time, passions died down, conversations resumed, but I kept Christina at a distance. Jake seemed happy next to her, and I decided that this was his choice, his life, and it was not my business to interfere. I simply focused on work and on saving up, which would lead me to my dream home. The IT world treated me quite favorably. In 5 years at the company, I learned to make mobile applications for small businesses, and although my projects will probably never make it into the history books, I felt a stability that warmed my soul. I lived modestly. A decent one-room apartment, an old but reliable Honda, no frills, but every month I put aside everything I could, approaching the cherished day of buying a house. I dreamed of a small but cozy 3-room house in a good area, carefully calculated the mortgage, planned to put down 20% of the down payment, and for more than a year I had been watching ads for houses for sale, getting pre-approved loans, and mentally trying on my future life. I did not tell anyone in my family about this because the experience with that ill-fated wedding taught me that if they found out about my savings, they would find a reason to ask for them. I developed a rule for myself: never discuss money with my family. My parents never knew how to manage their finances. My dad worked in construction his whole life until his health failed him and his back finally gave out, and my mom got by in retail, and they never knew what a financial safety net meant. They lived paycheck to paycheck, and that was it. Jake seemed to be making a good living working at a car dealership, but Christina had expensive tastes, and frankly, all his money went to satisfying her whims. The problem was always that once I extended a helping hand to my parents or brother, I had to wait forever for their return. And more often than not, nothing happened at all. And instead of gratitude, I heard the usual: "We will return everything to you next month," or "as soon as the situation settles down." But neither a month nor a year ever came. Everything remained the same. And that is why I learned to keep my mouth shut when things were going well for me. Because I realized that if you show that you can, there will definitely be those who will want to take advantage of it. I spent months looking at house listings online, driving around to different neighborhoods on weekends, going to every open house, all the while trying to capture that feeling that this was the place for me. Because I knew very clearly what I wanted: a move-in, ready home in a good neighborhood with good schools nearby. I may not have kids yet, but the thought of a home in a well-maintained area where I could hear children's voices and laughter warmed me, and the commute to work had to be convenient. I must have looked at least 50 options before my heart sank, and I said to myself, "This is the one." It was the perfect place. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen, warm hardwood floors, and a small, neat backyard where I could immediately imagine myself sitting on summer evenings with a cup of tea or with a few close friends. The house had been built in the 1980s, but it was well maintained, and the neighborhood was surprisingly quiet. Mostly young families and a few older couples. People were friendly, saying hello over the fence, kids riding bikes down the street, and it looked like life was done fairly and honestly. The asking price was right in line with the market, and I had enough savings to put down not 20, but 25% down. And when my offer was accepted right away, without any haggling, I couldn't believe that this was actually happening to me. After so many years of planning, strict restrictions, saving, and denying myself unnecessary things, I was finally becoming the owner of my own home. The whole process took about 6 weeks. Inspections, appraisals, endless paperwork, and more paperwork. And I even took time off from work to be there in person at every step because I didn't want to miss a single detail. And the day I finally got the keys was one of the best days of my life. Standing in the empty living room, clutching them in my palm, unable to take my eyes off the golden metal, thinking that this was mine now, truly mine, and no one could take it away from me. The next 2 weeks were spent in the bustle of moving. I hired movers for the heavy furniture, but I moved and unpacked most of the stuff myself, feeling a strange satisfaction from every box I opened. I bought new furniture, not luxurious, but something that fit the space perfectly and made it feel alive. A real dining table to entertain at, a decent sofa, a comfortable bed frame that was not from IKEA this time, and all of these felt like small victories, steps into adulthood in which a sense of stability had finally appeared. The whole time I was settling in, I didn't say a word to my family, although I put off the conversation every day thinking, "I'll call tomorrow." But I got bogged down in things again, and to be honest, I liked having something important that belonged only to me and didn't concern either my mother's advice or my father's comments or Christina's demands. I knew that sooner or later I would have to confess, but I put it off as long as I could. We called my parents every couple of weeks, and my mother began asking questions more and more often. Why was I always busy with housework if, according to her, I still lived in my old apartment? Finally, about 3 weeks after moving in, when I had already arranged the furniture the way I wanted and felt like the mistress of the new house, I called my mother. I didn't give her the address or tell her any details. I just told her that I had bought a house and was now settling in. There was a pause on the line, so long that I couldn't help but wonder if the connection had been cut off. And then my mother said, "Oh my God, that's so wonderful, darling. I'm so happy for you." But she didn't sound happy. There was surprise and a hint of disappointment in her voice. Then she said, "Come over for dinner this Saturday. We'd love to celebrate with you." And at the time, I didn't pay any attention to the strange tone of voice. I figured she was just stunned that I'd actually done it, so I said, "Sure, bought some good wine, and thought we'd have a nice family evening where I could show her photos of the house and tell her what my life looked like now. Saturday came, and I found myself feeling a rare sense of frivolous calm in recent months, and I went to my parents with a bottle of good wine, feeling quite confident and even happy, because I wanted to talk not about other people's dramatic twists and turns, but about my own quiet happiness. When I pulled up to the house, I immediately noticed Jake's car at the side of the road, and the first thing I thought was almost cute. Mom must have decided to invite him and Christina too, so that it would be a real family dinner. You know how it is. A common table, voices, the smell of roast and cinnamon, and before I had time to raise my hand to knock, the door swung open and Mom, almost intercepting my movement, said hurriedly and too loudly, "Hannah, come in, come in." And there was a nervous tremor in her voice, and her gaze kept trying to slip towards the living room, which seemed strange to me. And as soon as I crossed the threshold, Christina appeared from the kitchen, deftly going around Mom, and seeing me, she clasped her hands, as if she were announcing the winner of a TV show, and almost shouted, "I'm pregnant." And I froze in place. Because of all the possible news that day, this was definitely not the one I expected to hear, and I only uttered either an awkward or polite, "Wow, wow, congratulations," although inside I felt a painful pang that the moment for such declared joy was poorly chosen, because I had come to celebrate, as funny as it sounds, the birthday of my home, a small personal milestone that I had worked so hard to achieve. And instead, the space was instantly filled with news that left no room for anything else, and I said, "Thank you," not being sure to whom of us it was addressed. Christina, beaming and already holding my hand in her fingers, as if she was afraid that I would run away from her delight, still chattering, said that she had found out about it 3 days ago and asked if I could believe it, because she herself could hardly think clearly from excitement, and, of course, the names were already chosen, too. How could it be otherwise? Emma for a girl and Michael for a boy, and oh, how much space they would need, for the nursery, for all the necessities, a stroller, a chair, a chest of drawers. And while she was listing, Jake appeared from behind her shoulder with a wide grin on his face, and said in his boyish tone, "Hello, sister. Crazy news, huh?" And I, trying to keep my composure, handed my mother a bottle of wine, and she mechanically took it, put it on the already set dining table, and then I saw candles, napkins, plates with still warm food, and all this was decorated so solemnly that the thought of an accident disappeared by itself, because this was not prepared for us to celebrate my purchase. They were going to celebrate something else here, and my mother, as if reading my look, said, "Tonight we are celebrating the baby." And with this confirmation, she reinforced what I had already understood, adding that Christina had reported the wonderful news today. And at dinner, Christina, having taken a couple of bites, continued to talk almost without pauses, talking about morning sickness, which, according to her, began so quickly, as if the body wanted to immediately remind about itself, about the first visit to the doctor, about the tests, about what cute tiny things she had already looked at on the internet, and behaved as if she were the first woman on earth who had to experience pregnancy. And Jake was hanging on her every word, nodding as if he was afraid to miss a single note of her monologue, and only when the plates fell silent for a moment and the glasses clinked did my mother turn to me and finally say softly, as if remembering why else I was there, "So, Hannah, tell us about this house you bought." And there was both curiosity and caution in her request. I took out my phone, opened the album where I kept pictures taken in the best midday light, and showed them the pictures. The front with the neat porch, the sunny living room, the kitchen with matte cabinets, the small bedroom with a window overlooking a green yard, and I told them that it was a 3-bedroom house in Maple Heights, that I had managed to get a great price for it, that the inspection had gone without surprises, and I was very pleased because everything had turned out even better than I expected. But as soon as I caught my breath, Christina abruptly, almost boyishly snatched the phone from my fingers and began to scroll through the photos. And as the screen showed her one room after another, her expression changed. The radiant smile disappeared from her face. Her gaze darkened, her cheekbones tensed, and handing the phone back to me, she said evenly, but with emphasis, "This house should be ours." And I laughed, because I decided that she was joking. That's how some family dinners are arranged. Without a drop of black humor, you can't do without. And I asked, "What?" And without blinking, she answered, "I'm serious," crossed her arms over her chest, and as if summing it up, added, "Jake and I need him more than you do. We're having a baby." And I slowly looked around the table, saw how Mom nods, Dad nods, and Jake nods too, and they all look at me as if what was said really made sense, and as if the only right way out had already been decided without my participation. I looked straight at Christina, and trying to speak as calmly as possible, although everything was boiling inside, said, "I will not give you my house." Are you kidding me? And I felt how the tension that had been accumulating all this time began to rise in my chest in a heavy wave. But before I could say anything else, my mother leaned towards me, her eyes sparkled, and her voice sounded soft, almost coaxing. "Hannah, dear, Christina is right. They are starting a family. They need space for a child." I was stunned for a second because hearing something like this from my own mother was almost like a stab in the back. I repeated firmly, raising my voice slightly, "What if I'm alone? This is my house. I saved money for years to buy it." And then Jake, who had been sitting silently until then, muttered something under his breath, but loud enough for me to hear, about how I was a blue stocking, how I would never get married anyway. These words hit harder than I expected, and I felt my cheeks burn, but I did not allow myself to show weakness and abruptly stood up from the table. "This is ridiculous. I will not have this conversation." It was as if Christina had been waiting for just this. She suddenly lost control of herself, and screams poured out of her, that she was pregnant, that she needed space for the child, that she was not going to raise him in a cramped apartment, and her words overwhelmed me like an avalanche. She cried and screamed at the same time, and it looked so fake that everything inside me was clenching with indignation. And suddenly she shouted, "You don't deserve this house. You are selfish. You only care about yourself." I grabbed my purse, ready to leave, when her voice cut through the air again. "If you don't give us this house, I'm getting rid of this baby." There was a silence so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. I stopped at the door, turned to face them, and thought, did she just threaten to abort me to get my house out of my hands? I expected Mom and Dad to immediately reprimand her, to tell her that this was beyond the pale. I expected Jake, for once in his life, to be horrified by his wife's words. But instead, Jake looked at me with a look that made my insides go cold and said menacingly, "If anything happens to my baby because of your selfishness, Hannah, it will be on you." "Are you serious?" I breathed out, not believing what was happening. Mom stood up and followed me, her steps quick, her voice cutting into my back. "Hannah, you drove a pregnant woman to despair. This is what your stubbornness has led to." And Dad, who had been sitting silently until then, nodded and added, "You need to do the right thing and give them the house." I couldn't listen to another word. I literally ran out of their house, barely holding back tears, and drove to my own, shaking with fear and rage. My phone started blowing up before I even got home. Mom, Dad, and Jake were sending one text after another, accusing me of cruelty and heartlessness. And Christina sent a long stream of texts where she claimed that she was on the verge of losing the baby and that it was all my fault. They were using the unborn child as a weapon, as blackmail, to steal my house from me and completely destroy my trust in my family. I blocked all their numbers, blocked their access to my social media pages because I needed time to think and at least for a little while to get rid of their constant attacks. The next few weeks passed surprisingly quietly. I threw myself into work, took on additional projects, stayed late at night just to not return to these thoughts. And still, there was bitterness inside. But I decided I will celebrate the housewarming anyway. Even if my family is not happy with my happiness, I have people who sincerely support me. I invited colleagues, a few close friends, and my cousins, Sarah and Mike, who always stayed out of family drama and refused to let anyone drag them into squabbles. The party was wonderful. Delicious food, laughter, easy conversation, sincere congratulations. Everyone walked around the rooms, admiring the house, stroking the new surfaces of the furniture with their palms, commenting on how cozy and warm it was. I finally felt myself coming to my senses, that the darkness was beginning to recede. And it was at that moment when laughter was ringing in the living room and glasses were filling with wine that my front door literally swung open, and Mom, Dad, Jake, and Christina rushed in as if they owned the place. "How did you find my address?" I demanded, not believing my eyes. Christina immediately resumed her performance. Pressing her hand to her stomach and almost screaming, she declared that this house belonged to her and her child. But this time I noticed something that had not happened before. Christina no longer made dire threats about terminating the pregnancy, no longer played on my feelings of guilt so openly and mercilessly, but chose her words much more carefully, clearly understanding that here, in my living room, were people who did not belong to our family and were not obliged to take her performance at face value. I straightened up, looked at everyone, and said firmly, almost coldly, "You need to leave. All of you." Immediately, but instead of obeying, Christina, as if in a fit of rage, rushed to my dining room table, trying to overturn it and sweep all the dishes onto the floor. My heart sank into my heels, but fortunately, my colleague Marcus, a strong and determined man, managed to grab her by the arms, stopping her from doing something crazy. At that very moment, Jake, jumping up from his chair, hit Marcus in the face with such force as if he wanted to provoke a fight, shouting, "Don't touch my wife!" Real chaos ensued. Several people rushed to separate them, and it took us a lot of effort to get my entire family out of the house. When the door slammed behind them, I suddenly realized that the holiday was completely ruined. The guests, shocked by the scene, began to disperse rather quickly, each leaving behind a trail of understatement and cautious glances, as if no one wanted to directly say that they had just witnessed something absolutely crazy. I was left standing in the middle of my living room. My heart was beating so hard that it was echoing in my temples, and I was truly scared. The next morning, as soon as I opened my eyes, another blow awaited me. Christina had launched a full-blown Facebook campaign against me. My feed was filled with her posts, photos of empty cribs, strollers, tiny onesies with captions like, "This is where your nephew could have slept." But Hannah took that away from him. I shuddered in horror. She was using her belly and her pregnancy as a weapon, putting on a show for the world to make me feel guilty and everyone else feel sorry and supportive. The manipulation had reached a new level, and I suddenly realized it was time to set a hard boundary. I wrote her a final message directly on Facebook, choosing every word carefully. "I will never give you my house. If you don't stop stalking me immediately, I will file a restraining order against you for stalking and extortion. This is your only warning." After that, her account went silent. For 2 weeks straight, not a single post, not a hint that she was continuing the attack. I even allowed myself to relax a little, thought that maybe they finally realized that these games would not work with me. But one Saturday morning, just as the sun was rising, my door was suddenly shaken by a monstrous knock, so loud as if someone was trying to knock it off its hinges. I jumped up, my heart in my throat, looked through the peephole and saw Jake. His face was purple, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like he was overwhelmed with rage. I didn't open the door, but he screamed so loudly that the whole street must have heard, "Hannah!" "Open the door right now," I answered, trying to sound firm. "Go away, Jake!" But his screams only grew louder. "You killed my baby!" he screamed. My insides sank as if I had been punched in the stomach. "Christina had a miscarriage, and it's all your fault." Even in this maelstrom of madness, the thought of losing a child was terrifying. I pressed my hands to my face, not believing that I was hearing it through my door. Jake wouldn't stop screaming, calling me a monster, calling me all the scariest names I could ever repeat out loud. He was screaming that my family was done with me forever, that I had ruined everything. When his footsteps finally faded and silence fell on the street again, I collapsed on the couch and burst into tears. Even knowing that Christina had always been a master manipulator, even knowing that they were trying to trick me into giving up my house, I felt guilty. My thoughts kept nagging me. What if the stress she had gone through because of all this really had caused her miscarriage? What if I was partly to blame for it? I didn't sleep a wink that night, tossing and turning, listening to the ticking of the clock and thinking about the unborn child, wondering if there was a way to turn things around, to avoid the catastrophe. The next morning, Sunday, I gathered my strength and called my friend Lisa. She was away on business during my housewarming, but she had known Christina since college and understood her character better than most. If anyone could tell me the truth as it really was, it was Lisa. "Liza, I need to talk to someone," I said, feeling my voice shaking. "Can you come?" "Of course. What happened?" "You sound terrible," she answered immediately. When she arrived, I told her everything, about the demands to give up the house, about the performance with the announcement of the pregnancy, about the threats, about the family pressure, about this unfortunate miscarriage. Liza listened silently, without interrupting. Her gaze was attentive and focused, and in the end she said quietly, "I need to show you something." She looked at her watch. "I'll be there in an hour." When Liza appeared on the threshold, her face was so serious that my heart sank. I realized that now I was going to hear something that would change everything. She walked silently into the living room, sat down opposite me, and taking her phone out of her purse, said in a quiet, almost whispering voice, "Hannah, I've been thinking for a long time about whether or not to show you this, but after what you just told me, I have no right to remain silent any longer." She opened the messages and handed the screen to me. I leaned over and saw a correspondence with Christina, dated a few days earlier. The very first words pierced me like an icy knife. "Everything is working fine." Hannah really thinks I'm pregnant. I can't believe how gullible she is. I felt my blood run cold, and with my heart pounding, I looked up at Lisa, but she only nodded. "Keep watching." At the bottom was her own message. "Wait, what? You're really pregnant, aren't you?" And Christina's response, "Of course not. But if I can convince her family, they'll pressure her until she gives us the house." Jake has been wanting to move out of our cramped apartment for a long time, and when I saw the pictures of this house, I knew it had to be ours. Lisa texted back, "Christina, this is crazy. You do realize you can't fake a pregnancy, right?" But Christina kept saying, "Look at me. I've already told Jake's parents that I'm going to miscarry. They'll blame Hannah entirely, and she'll feel so guilty that she'll give in and hand over the keys. I'm ready to go all the way. We'll be living in this house by next month, and Hannah will be paying the mortgage." I stared at the screen, feeling dizzy. This whole thing was a carefully orchestrated scam. Every word, every tearful dinner, every accusation, every scene. It was all staged. Lisa quietly said, "And that's not all," and scrolled on. There were Christina's frank confessions about how easy it was for her to control Jake, how easy it was to ingratiate herself with his parents, how she was going to burst into tears at the right moment, pretending to be a woman who had lost her child. She even relished the upcoming performance, confident that everyone would swallow her lies. "Can you send me those screenshots?" I asked, and my voice broke. "Already done," Lisa replied. "I sent everything to your email. You need proof, and you have it." A storm of contradictions overwhelmed me. Rage that my own family trusted a stranger and turned against me. Relief that I had not actually caused any miscarriage. Disgust at the idea that someone could fake a pregnancy, and the loss of a child for the sake of square footage and the desire to live in someone else's house. After Lisa left, I spent the rest of the day pacing back and forth, trying to collect my thoughts and decide what to say. By evening, I already knew that there was no retreat. They would have to see the truth with their own eyes. I had to put an end to this. On Monday, right after work, I got in the car and drove to my parents' house. Jake's car was already parked outside their house, and that was exactly what I wanted, to have everyone there. When I walked up the steps, Mom opened the door and immediately pounced on me, screaming, "How dare you show up here after what you did?" But I didn't stop. I walked past her straight into the living room where Dad, Jake, and Christina were sitting. Christina was dressed all in black, like she was at a funeral. She had a handkerchief clutched in her hands. Her eyes were deliberately red, as if she had just been wiping away tears. Dad said gloomily, "You have the nerve to come here?" Jake jumped up. "Get out of my parents' house." Christina cried even louder. "I can't even look at her. She killed my child." "Everyone, shut up and listen," I said, my voice so loud that the room went silent. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots. "I need to show you something. I have proof that Christina was never pregnant." The messages flashed on the screen, and I held it out for everyone to see. The room went so quiet you could hear your own breathing. Christina's face went white, as if all the blood had drained from it. "That's impossible," my mother muttered, but she still came closer, shaking to look at my phone. Jake snatched the phone from my mother's hands and stared at the screen, breathing heavily. His face changed with each line, first confusion, then bewilderment, then rage, which was breaking out more and more. "What is this?" he asked, turning to Christina. His voice was muffled, as if he was afraid to hear the answer. "She's lying!" Christina screamed, standing up abruptly as if she had been pinned to the wall. "She made this all up to hurt me." I looked at her coldly and said, "Then you won't mind if I ask to see the hospital certificate about your miscarriage, will you?" Christina opened her mouth, but no words came out. At this point, Jake still couldn't tear his eyes away from the correspondence, reading each line like a sentence. "Christina, tell me the truth. Are you making this up?" he asked, and there was no longer the confidence of a husband defending his wife in his voice, only confusion and horror. She began to sob, but this time her tears didn't look fake. They were real, ugly, desperate tears of a person who was driven into a corner. "I wanted us to have a home," she screamed, and her voice broke into a hysterical shriek. "We deserve it more than she does. She lives alone like an old maid." The room exploded. Dad started shouting, accusing Christina of meanness and lies. Mom rushed between them, repeating the same question to Jake. "Did you know about this? Tell me, did you know?" Jake looked at his wife as if he saw her true face for the first time in his life, and this sight tore him apart from the inside. I turned to my parents and said quietly but firmly, "You chose her lies over your daughter. You supported her when she tried to steal from me. I am done with you." I left the house without looking back, and I never went back there again. A week had passed since I had laid bare the truth about Christina when my parents showed up on my doorstep. I saw them through the peephole, and frankly, they looked terrible. Mom with heavy bags under her eyes, Dad as if he had aged a whole decade in those few days. I didn't want to open the door, but Mom called my name from behind the door. "Hannah, please." "We need to apologize. I opened the door a crack but didn't invite them in." "What do you want?" I asked. Dad said right away, "We were wrong." So wrong. "We should have trusted you from the start." Mom burst into tears, her words drowned out by her sobs. "We're so sorry, honey." "We gave in to Christina's manipulation and failed you as parents." "You didn't just fail me," I said, feeling the bitterness rising in me. "You sided with the man who tried to steal my home. You called me selfish and cruel just because I refused to give up what I spent years of my life earning." Mom nodded, wiping away her tears. "We know." "There's no excuse for what we did." Dad cleared his throat and added, "Jake's talking about divorce. He's going to therapy, trying to figure out how he got himself into all this." "I think it's the right thing for him," Mom chimed in. "Christina started going to therapy too. It sounds like she's getting help with her issues." I almost laughed in their faces. Her issues. She faked a pregnancy, threatened to have an abortion, and falsely accused me of miscarriage in order to steal my house. Those aren't issues. Those are criminal behaviors. Dad looked down and said quietly, "You're right. We know you may never be able to forgive us, but we should have at least tried to apologize." "I'm not ready to forgive," I replied. "You showed me who you really were when you thought I had what you wanted." With that, they left, and I returned to the quiet of my home, the one I bought with my own hands and my own labor, and which I almost lost because of the greed and manipulation of my own family. 4 months have passed since then. I haven't spoken to them once. Everything I know about the family drama comes from Lisa. She told me that Jake did file for divorce, but then they decided to try counseling to give the marriage another chance. Christina now posts long posts about mental health, the importance of taking responsibility for past mistakes, and growth and healing. She never names me or mentions the story of the house directly, but I know that every word she says is directed specifically at this, specifically at me. My parents tried calling me more than once, but I never picked up, and each call echoed in my phone like an echo of a past I never wanted to return to. They sent birthday and holiday cards, neatly addressed in their handwriting, but I threw them away without even opening them, because I no longer wanted to read words that contain no real remorse or sincere desire to restore trust. Jake once sent a text of apology, dry and short, but I deleted it before I even finished reading it, because there was no anger or pain left inside me, only emptiness and finality. I realized that I wasn't truly angry. I was just done with them, like a person closing the door on something that no longer has power over their life. This whole bitter experience taught me something simple and terrible. For my family, I was never a daughter or a sister, but a bank account, a source of resources that could be squeezed dry if necessary. When they decided that I had something they wanted, they were ready to trample my name, my life, and my heart, just to get it. I became an obstacle to them, not a person, and it was at that moment that I realized that no amount of blood can outweigh the lack of love and respect. Work was going great, and last month I was promoted to senior developer, which brought not only pride but also a nice raise in salary. I used the extra money to pay off the mortgage early, and for the first time in my life felt real freedom, knowing that I would be able to fully pay off the house not in 30 years, as planned, but in just 12. This feeling, being the mistress of my own home and my own destiny, inspired me and made me stronger than ever. I found new friends, among colleagues with whom I now shared not only work projects, but also sincere human conversations, and among neighbors with whom we shared dinners, jokes, and small joys of everyday life. I suddenly realized that when you are no longer weighed down by constant family dramas, there is much more room in your heart and head for real, healthy relationships, for warmth that does not require sacrifice. My home became exactly what I dreamed of. I painted the walls of the spare bedrooms in soft colors, turned one into a cozy home office where I could focus on work and creativity, and arranged another as a guest room for friends who always knew that my door was open. I planted flowers in the backyard, and every morning they greeted me with their quiet fragrance, reminding me that life can be beautiful in the little things. I bought a cute patio set and sometimes hosted dinners under the open sky, and my guests invariably noted how calm and peaceful the atmosphere in this house had become. The neighborhood was exactly as I had imagined it would be, lively, friendly, open. A neighboring family with 2 children often asked me to help the kids with their math homework, and I was surprised by how nice it was to feel needed again, not for money, but for my knowledge and concern. The couple living across the street invited me to barbecues, and we laughed until late at night, enjoying the simple conversations and sincerity that seemed so scarce in these walls. This was exactly the kind of community I had always wanted to be a part of, and I finally felt like I belonged. Sometimes I still wondered if reconciliation with my family was possible. Lisa said that maybe I should at least listen to my parents, since they had already apologized. But every time I thought about it, I remembered their willingness to support the woman who had literally tried to rob me, and their words about me being selfish. Apologies cannot erase this scar. They cannot turn betrayal into care and meanness into love. Maybe someday I'll be ready to make a move if I see that my parents really understand the depth of their mistake. Maybe Jake will finally take responsibility for his own life and realize how destructive Christina was. Maybe one day, they'll all understand why their betrayal hurt me so much. The ironic thing about it all was that Christina thought she was so clever when she pulled off her fake pregnancy scheme. She probably believed that even if she got caught, her family would forgive her and she'd still have a relationship with them. But her plan turned out to be a disaster for everyone. Jake was now doubting everything about their marriage. My parents were tormented by the knowledge that they'd supported her lie, and I was gone from their lives as if I'd never been there. She destroyed her own family by trying to destroy mine. Sometimes I still got angry thinking about how close they'd come to success. If Lisa hadn't shown me those messages, I might have given in to my guilt and given in, helping them with money or even agreeing to a down payment on their house. The manipulation was so subtle that sometimes I shudder at the thought of how easily things could have turned out differently. But most of all, I'm grateful that I learned their true colors before I spent more years of my life maintaining a relationship that was always one-sided. Now my home is my sanctuary. Every time I come home from work and open the door, I'm greeted by a silence that's not filled with loneliness, but with peace. There's no family drama, no manipulation, no endless demands on my money and patience. There's just me, my career, my true friends, and the space I've built for myself with my own hands and my own labor. And that's the best life I could ever wish for.